tudo certo, Thiago.
Boa tarde a todos que estão nos acompanhando pelo YouTube.
Good afternoon, everyone that are accompanying us here from YouTube, the International Seminar of Public Accounts. We're in the second part. We're going to talk about the new model of accounts control in the budgetary process. In the morning, we talked about the reformation of the public expenses, and we talked about two proposals of the of laws. The panel was successful, had more than 1,000 participants. So I thank all of you that are accompanying us, and I still take advantage of this to instigate the participants to divulgate the link of this event to all the community of auditors that they can participate on this event. In this next panel, we will talk about the control of the budget and that need to be connected to a new legislation. So for that, we have here leadership for control of public expenses. So I thank all the panelists, Juliana Mendes da Silva. He works in the Ministry of Economy. Francisco Bessa. He works also in the Ministry of Economy, and we are waiting for our colleague Antonio Leonel that works in TCU. Thank you very much for the presence and for being here to debate with us. And I will pass the floor to Conselheiro Hinaldo da Paixão, which is an honor to have him here assisting us in this audit community. He's the counselor of the accounting auditing in Bahia, Brazilian state. He's accounting, he's master in accountability, accounting, and he's working in the public ministry for a long time. He works as a professor in Bahia as 16 years. He works for the Catholic University of Salvador and the Federal University. He has published many years for audit, and he's been in the governmental audit for more than 38 years. And it's a great pleasure for us to talk to him, to know his experience, his motivation, energy, and so we can have a better and more efficient control system that can bring more value to the society. So I pass the word to our counselor and thank him a lot for being here today again. Thiago, thank you very much for your gentleness. And I say that's a happy moment now. And my first words will be to thank our TCU, the one that has organized this event, and our vice president that is also here, our vice president Bruno Dantas that is from Bahia too, our homeland. And I would like to thank our supreme body, that's the TCU. And in second terms, I would like to congratulate this institution of control for the strategic view to organize this event so big as it is. I was looking at the programming and I see how the technique team is bringing into discussion extreme relevant topics that we have seen as necessary for these transformations we have been going through. So it's important for us to see the view from TCU, from the ones that are performing the actions, the perspective from the CGU, and the experience of the other countries. I have no doubt that this event is of extreme relevance. And in this afternoon, in this panel, the impact of the new model of rules for the budgetary control. I think it's important to notice that it may be a coincidence that we are in electoral seasons. Uh, Here, in the first moment, Thiago will make the presentation of the first topic, and the debaters will have a moment to discuss about the questions has brought up first, and then we will elaborate some questions so all the participants can discuss about. So in this afternoon, the goal is to uh, incite the debate uh, about the construction of an integrated system for the control of the public accounts. So the one that will present is Thiago Dutra. He's the actual correlator of the uh, TCU, and he's specialist in financial audit. He's master from the University in Lisbon. He has also worked in the GAO in the United States, and also his curriculum is very consistent, but it doesn't show how much he's done to the development of the audit in Brazil. So he's done a lot for our body. So I know how talented he is and how he has contributed to the control and the accompaniment of the public finances. So I'm here to hear one of more of his presentations that I had. I'm always fond of hearing him, and I am completely aware that will be very good and pleasing lecture. So I will also uh, m- give the space for the other speakers to make his considerations, and so I pass the parole to Thiago so he can have his 30 minutes of presentation.
Obrigado, conselheiro Reinaldo. Vou compartilhar aqui a tela
I will share my screen here. Thank you very
vamos
much.
começar
Let's start
o nosso painel, né,
our
com
panel
uma apresentação com o objetivo de
with a presentation with the
compartilhar
purpose
a
of
evolução recente
sharing the recent
modernizações
evolution of the accounting
no
model
Brasil,
in
em
Brazil,
especial no federal.
especially in the federal
E
state.
queria só confirmar se estão
I
todos
would, I would like
vendo
only
aqui a tela.
to confirm if everybody's seeing my screen.
Obrigado. Bom, vamos lá. E então essa apresentação está dividida
So
em
this
duas
presentation
partes.
is divided in three
Primeira,
parts.
nós vamos
The
falar
first
sobre o porquê de um novo
is
modelo de
why we
prestação de
need a
contas.
new model of
Na sequência,
accounting
o
control.
que é esse novo modelo de contas.
What is this
E um
new
tema
model
bem
of
específico,
accounts?
talvez que seja
And
até o centro da
then
nossa
a
discussão,
more specific
é a
topic,
questão da
which is
conformidade da despesa.
the
Isso,
conformity of
nós temos o
expenses,
desafio de certificar
because we have
a
the challenge of
conformidade
certifying to the
da execução
community
orçamentária financeira.
the
E,
execution of
do
the
ponto de vista
budgetary
metodológico, do
finances,
ponto de
and in
vista
terms of methodologies
novidades,
and novelties in this
também
model,
de
and also
reprodução, de
in
potencial de
repercussion
melhorar o
of the
processo orçamentário,
potential to
agregar
improve
valor
the
ao processo orçamentário.
budgetary
Talvez
process, maybe
parte
this
do
part
novo
of
modelo de
the
contas seja
new
uma
model
das mais
maybe
desafiadoras
one of the most challenging
e,
ones,
enfim, merece todo o
and it
estudo, todo o
deserves all
destaque.
the
Por
study
isso nós organizamos
and
esse seminário com esse
the
objetivo.
interest, and
Bom,
that's why we're
vamos
organizing
começar
this
com uma
seminar.
pergunta que todos nós
So let's
fazemos quando
start
temos uma mudança, né?
with the
Por que
question:
mudar, né?
why
Acho que
do we
essa
change?
premissa, essa pergunta, ela é
This premise is fundamental,
começamos aqui com
and we start
uma
with
teoria que todo
a
mundo já
little bit of
conhecia,
theory that
mas
we
é
all
sempre bom
know, but it's
relembrar.
always good
Nós
to
temos o ciclo
remember.
orçamentário,
We have a
seja no
budgetary
processo de
cycle that
elaboração,
passes
aprovação,
through
execução,
the
controle.
elaboration,
Todos já viram esse
approval,
ciclo,
execution, and
todos que
control
estudaram
stages.
auditoria e governamental e finanças públicas.
So this is
A
regarding
questão que
the
a gente
audit
talvez
and the
não
public
tenha
finance
com a
governmental
frequência
processes.
que
So
talvez deveria,
we always
é
see that
exatamente
not with
qual
the
medida
frequency
que
that
esse
we
ciclo
should,
orçamentário está
but the
gerando.
question is
Que
to
medida de
understand
controle que
how
isso
frequent, how often
efetivamente
this
está nesse processo
circle
orçamentário.
is
Para fazer isso, nós
being
temos um direito
performed.
já bem
So
definido,
to
esse direito é
understand that we have a
fundamental,
right
porque
that
sem
is
ele nós não
fundamental, that
conseguimos
because without it we
chegar
cannot
nos prazos corretos,
get to
chegar nos
the
momentos corretos de tomada de
right
decisão.
moments of taking
E
the
esse talvez seja
right decisions.
talvez essa seja uma das
So
grandes
this may
mudanças
be
nesse
one of the biggest
modelo que
changes
nós estamos fazendo
of the model we
com
are
políticas, é
creating now,
tentar chegar mais
so that we
rápido
can get
no processo
faster to
orçamentário
a
para conseguir
budgetary
alguma
process,
medida,
so
informar
that in
as
such a way we can
autoridades e os
inform the
gestores que estão tomando
authorities
decisão
who
em
are taking
relação
decisions
à alocação orçamentária e
related
a
to
gente vai ver os três
budgetary
objetivos do
allocation.
ano, né? A
Okay,
responsabilidade fiscal,
so the three
a alocação
goals of the
estratégica,
budget are the fiscal
institucionalização
responsibility,
racional dos
the
recursos
rational
e a
prioritization,
eficiente bens e
and
serviços.
the efficient
Esses três
delivery of goods and
objetivos
services. So these
são
are the three
estabelecidos aqui
main
pelas
goals
principais
of the
instituições
budget and
internacionais
are established
que
for the
pesquisam a
main
governança das
um,
finanças públicas a nível global, o Banco
financial
Mundial,
institutions in the world, the
FMI,
International Bank, the FMI,
o programa que
etc.
tem um programa de
So they
avaliação
should
das
be
finanças
regarded
públicas
as
patrocinado pelo Banco
important
Mundial
when we
e
look at this
pelo FMI.
new
E
proposal
os
we are
riscos
trying
convergem
to
nesses
offer.
três grandes
So
objetivos, que são
these
os
three
três
main
níveis
goals, they are
de
the three
análise
main
das
levels of
finanças
analysis of
públicas.
the
E a gente
public
pode enxergar
finances
bem
too.
isso,
We can
por
see that
exemplo,
very
quando a
well
gente
when we
compara e faz um
compare
match entre
and
os tipos de contas
match
que nós temos, o tipo de
as
prestação de
the
contas, o
uh,
nível de contas de gozo,
accountability we
que
have.
são
For example, we have
as contas
the
consolidadas
government
do governo.
accounts,
A gente tem uma
which are
relação
the
natural
fiscal
entre
responsibility, it corresponds to that.
agregados fiscais, agregados orçamentários,
We
que
also
têm
have some
responsabilidade fiscal,
added
e o nível ministerial, o
budgets
nível consolidado dos
that
ministérios, né? O
sticks
Ministério
to
da
that too.
Supervisor,
And regarding the
diversos órgãos
ministry
oficiais
accounts,
federais, né?
it
A oportunidade
is
de
related to
prestação
all
de
the
contas, de
ministries, the bodies we have in
responsabilidade de
the
cada pasta
uh,
ministerial, e aí a gente
republic.
pode
So this
avaliar em que medida
we have to
essas políticas
evaluate
estão sendo
how these
efetivas,
politics are being
eficientes,
effective
em
and
especial
how much
os
they actually
custos de
need these
oportunidade entre uma
costs and
política e
these
outra, entre um
expenses
programa e outro, e
and the
no nível
programs that
mais
they are
operacional, nós temos
proposing.
as contas individuais,
And this is
igual aos
related to the
autônomos, aos
rational
funcionários
prioritization.
federais,
And then on a third
que
level, we have the
são
individual
exatamente para avaliação
federal
da entrega
entities, the
desses
accounts of
recursos de
these
responsabilidade de cada
entities.
órgão entidade.
So this is related to each
Essa,
entity, and
essa é a
they are
teoria,
going to deliver the goods
e a
and services
gente
for
tem
the nation.
ela como ponto de partida, mas
So
como diz o
taking this
ditado,
as a
na
starting
prática a
point,
teoria é outra.
this is a theory, but
Esse aqui é um
when we go to the
diagnóstico
practice, the theory is
do
completely
primeiro
different.
estudo
So
que foi
we have a
feito
diagnosis
há
here
exatos 10
that
anos
was
pela
done
OCDE,
10 years ago by
e
OECD,
foi interessante porque nós
and the
mesmos nós
conclusion,
praticamente fomos auditados, né?
and
Esse
basically
foi
we
o
were
primeiro grande
audited
trabalho,
on that
mas com a participação de
work
12
done by
instituições
the
de garantia e
OECD
controle de países emergentes e países
that was
desenvolvidos. E
auditing emergent countries, and we were
especificamente em
being
relação ao
analyzed
tema
there. And when they
integração, contas de
were
governo,
talking about the
órgãos
integration of
centrais do
the
Ministério da
government
República,
accounts
esses
and the
todos do
individual
Ministério
accounts,
e das entidades
those who
federais,
are directed
nós
to the
tivemos essa
ministries
conclusão.
and the
De que não havia
federal
uma
bodies, we
relação
got to the conclusion
entre
that
esse
there was
trabalho
no
mais
connection
consolidado
between
e
this
o
more
trabalho
consolidated work
em instâncias
and
inferiores, não havia uma
the
correlação. E nós
work done in
mudamos
the
essa
inferior
essa
instances.
intempestividade. A pessoa não fazia essa
So
análise
TCU didn't do
na
the
parte e
analysis
depois a análise do todo.
from the
Né? A gente
part
tinha que
and
fazer
then
a
to the
análise do
whole.
todo
We were
e
first
depois a
making
análise
the
das partes,
analysis of
dos
the
órgãos
whole and then to the
individuais,
parts,
dos órgãos e institutos
and going to
federais.
the
A
ministries
boa
and the
notícia é que
federal bodies. So the good news is that the OCDE gave two recommendations to us at that time, and we implemented the two of them along the 10 years, and we see that this has been going through the past years and it has worked a lot. So right before this OECD uh, audit, we were evaluated by the PAP that has gone through the accounts of more than 50 countries, and they have a framework of more than 30 indicators, and it takes all the public finances management cycle, and it's a external audit bodies that also helped us to understand how our indicators were. So in the external audit indicator, we were not well evaluated because at that moment we didn't have the uh, emission of opinion that could really portray the reality of the finances of the government. And in the perspective of the evaluation, the practice that was vigent was very legalist and without the focus on the trustworthiness on the controls of the institution of financial institutions. So that was how we proceeded before, and for this reason we got to that conclusion. But uh, as the last conclusion for our discussion today is that the utilization level is by the the branch is very low. So we should not only improve our processes, but we should also improve our relationship with the legislative branch. So after this evaluation, not only to criticize, we made a project in the International Bank from 2011-2014 to mediate, uh, to have a strategy of mediation between these two branches. And in 2014, we developed a strategy with the purpose of increasing transparency, utility, and credibility of the public accounts through a gradual implementation of the branches and the bodies and entities with more transparency, following the international practices. That was a 6-year term strategy, so that in 2020 we could have a second strategy, which is the one we have now, with the normative decision we have now to implement, which is due to 2026. In 2016, we had the acknowledgement of the advances in the improvement on the transparency and the utility of the accountability. At that time, we already had a need of transparency, and today's data, these are our results. In this period, they we got to see transparency in several areas of the union accounts. Here are some examples. The active debt rating, the tributary credit with suspense exigibility. Also, all that they are like trillion reais, and from then on, the third indicator is billions. When we go to the provisions, the uh, inactive military, the pensions, the adjustment to the active debt loss, the railroads, and etc. So the adjustment to the losses for the IRS, and anyhow, so there are several indicators here. We are just showing some, and the most important are the decisions that are taken from these numbers. For example, the refurbishing of the presidency,
A reforma tributária que está sendo
the
debatida também utiliza
tributary reform
esses dados.
that is
Toda a
debated,
discussão de pacto
all the
federativo
discussion
civil
of,
que a gente
regarding the
pode usufruir
federative
também dessas
pacts,
informações,
they
e
are
também
taking
políticas
into
sociais de
consideration this data,
infraestrutura podem
and
utilizar
also
essas
the
informações
infrastructure
para o
uh,
desenho e para a
processes are
avaliação
taking
dessas
into
contas.
consideration this data.
E, bom, essa é a foto, né,
So this
a
is the
composição do
picture
patrimônio
of
líquido da União,
the
que de
liquid
certa forma acaba coincidindo com
possessions
esse
of the
movimento de
union. So
aprimoramento da auditoria financeira. Todos esses registros que eu
all
mencionei, de
these
certa forma,
registers
geraram um impacto
have
grande no
generated a
modelo
big
de hoje ter uma
impact
visão
in such a way that
mais
nowadays we can
realista
have a
desse
more
posicionamento da
realistic
União. Nós temos 11 trilhões de reais
view on
passivos,
the
6 trilhões de
accounts.
reais em ativos,
So we see that we have
e
six
faltam 5
trillion
trilhões de reais para a
in
gente pagar tudo que
actives,
a
and
União
we are
tem.
lacking of
Essa é
money
a
to
foto,
pay
mas aí
everything that
você,
we
de
need,
certa
and it's a
forma,
very
isso
more
ajuda a
realistic
fazer uma avaliação de
picture. And
sustentabilidade
this
daqueles
helps
recursos
us
líquidos
to
gerados.
see a more
Bom,
a better
dito
evaluation
isso,
of sustainability for the
o que
union.
é o novo modelo de
So
controle
what
de
is the
contas, né? O
new
que muda?
account control model?
Depois desses
So after
diagnósticos
this
que todos nós,
diagnostic,
FEF, Banco Mundial,
we got
OCDE,
to a
em
better
2017
understanding
instituiu uma
with the
resolução
OECD,
que
and in
regulamenta o processo de
2017
emissão de
we had a
relatórios
resolution
trimestrais sobre as contas de governo,
that
basicamente adotando
was
padrões
to
internacionais.
improve the
Conhecido,
government
a
accounts
gente fez um
to
piloto
be more with
no
the
âmbito do Ministério da
international
Fazenda.
standards.
Para ter uma ideia, em 2015 não tinha
And
um
in
relatório que
2015,
consolidasse
the
todos os dados
IRS
sobre
didn't
as
have
contas
a
públicas. Pela primeira
report
vez em
that could
2016
have all the
conseguiu.
informations together.
Já
And in
habilitando o modelo de relato
2017 is the
agregado.
first
Então,
time we
isso
had that
foi
with
uma
this
forte parceria
integration
do
that
próprio
we
Ministério
got
com a
to
CGU, e
achieve.
a experiência foi bem sucedida e foi
So this experience was well
ampliada e
succeeded,
universalizada
and
para
we
toda a
could
administração pública federal,
widen that
primeiro
to
desse
the
ano, mas
public
especialmente em
administration
2018.
in the federal terms.
E
So
depois de
this helped a
vários
lot in
anos
several levels.
de avaliação do modelo de
And
contas
after
e
the evaluation of
da
the
efetividade,
account
quer dizer, da
model and the
potencialidade desses controles de conta,
effectiveness of
foi
this tool,
instituída uma
we
mudança
instituted
mais
a
abrangente em
change
todas as
that
etapas da
was
quantificação de
deeper
contas,
in
de
all the
certificação
stages,
de contas
from
e de julgamento de contas, por meio da
the
Instrução
accounts
Normativa
judgment,
34 de
and
2020, que altera a Instrução Normativa 63 de
that operates
2010.
according to the
E
normative
ela é
uh,
complementada pela decisão definitiva do Conselho
198 from
justamente diz que
2022.
traz critérios
So
mais
this brings
objetivos,
more
e que,
criteria that are more
fazendo um paralelo com
objective,
a discussão de hoje de manhã,
and
né, que
making a
falamos da
parallel
lei
with
eleitoral,
to more this
que
morning
todo
discussion is
ano,
that
de certa forma, traz regulamentações
every
sobre
single year we have
o
some new
processo orçamentário, os fundos
regulamentation for
corridos,
the
e
budgetary
chegamos nesse
processes,
modelo que
and we
todos os anos nós
before
tivemos
we
duas
had
decisões normativas,
always the
de certa
same
forma,
two
regulamentando o
uh,
fluxo de contas.
normative
Agora nós
decisions that we
temos,
had to
numa
do, and
essa,
these
essa
now we don't
temporada
have this.
vivendo,
We are more steady with that
a partir de critérios bem objetivos, para,
from
de certa
because we have
forma,
more
a
objective
partir
criteria to take
das
these
contas da
decisions
União
from
que
the
operam todos os anos. Então, nós
union
temos um time que
accounts.
monitora isso.
So I'm gonna
Bom, o que temos
let you
de
know how
novo?
it is with
Contato,
this next
prestação de
slides.
contas. Nós
So what
temos
is
aí
novelty?
o conceito
Regarding the
de unidade de
accountability, you
prestação de
have
contas,
the
que
concept of the
é muito mais
accountability
interessante.
units,
É um conceito que internacionalmente
which is
aceito, né,
more
chamado
suitable to
reporting
the
unit.
more accepted to the international
Certamente
standards
define
that's
que
accepted
a
by the
instituição que
countries.
presta contas
So the institution that
grupos
we
de
should be
usuários
accountable to
externos interessados em saber
have
como
some
esses
external
controles funcionam na
users
instituição,
to
com
analyze
algum
them.
nível de autonomia
So they
na
have some
atividade
autonomy
administrativa,
in
operacional,
administrative
financeira,
terms,
e,
financial terms to
de certa
analyze it.
forma, isso ajudou a
So this
enxergar
has
o
helped us
Ministério como
to
sendo uma
see the
unidade de
ministry
conta
as
na administração
a
interna.
unit of
E
accountability
isso mudou
in a
bastante a
direct
relação
way, and this
de
has
mais
changed a lot
integrada
from
cada
the
ministério. Também
previous
foi adotada o
administrative
relato integrado, que até aqui em
administration.
2018 era uma tendência, agora já é
So
praticamente um
this
dos principais modelos
uh,
de relatório
Bill
integrado feito
84
no mundo inteiro. E
2020
uma das
is
grandes
the
mudanças,
tendency
uma
and
das
to
grandes,
implement the change
um dos grandes avanços do próprio relato integrado é esse equilíbrio
in the
entre
integrated
informação financeira
report
e informação
that
de
can
desempenho.
balance
A gente tem a
the
informação
financial
integrada que
information and the
buscamos
performance
desenvolver isso para
information,
agregar
so we can
valor
have a better performance
e
with that.
quais são os
And this
valores
also can
agregados
also
que cada
provide
instituição
more
que presta
value, and
contas
what
para a
are the
sociedade.
values that
Na
we
etapa de
can be
certificação de
accountable to
contas,
society.
foi
So when we
instituído
have to talk about
foi instituída a
the
certificação dupla, né? Uma
account
opinião
certification, we have a
sobre a
double
fiabilidade das
certification.
informações financeiras
that express a opinion regarding the financial institution. So this is very aligned with what is using the tribunal, but needed to be connected to the international standards of audit and the best practices too. So we got to do that in this stage here. A big change that we had is that first, normally we had to the base as the certification the CPF, but now we are focusing on the institution, not taking into consideration the responsibility of the managers. So we also have the focus on the Financial Effects Act, which is
bem difícil fazer uma extrapolação para outro tipo de ato administrativo sem efeitos financeiros. A adoção de padrões internacionais,
The adoption of international patterns, and by consequence, in the approach based on risk, and we can generate an evaluation in chain of the quality of control, so encourage the manager to have defending the materialities that by nature we have some lack of error. When we adopt a level of materiality that's below it, there is an intolerable level to the purpose of that do not affect the opinion of the auditor. And the judgment of accounts, one of the biggest change is the proportional accountability. So the Minister of State, the Secretary of the Final Areas, and the Secretary of Accounting of every minister. We also have a division by type of account type. So we have an annual flow of accounting judgment. To the other ones, we have the possibility of the account taken, which should be relevant according to the guidelines. The same principles are in the accounting, and the focus at the citizens has the delivery of values by the institution, what is the strategic goals, and not only the reviewing look, also to showing the others what the institution is doing. The financial connectivity, as I said, it's one of the big changes, and it's also with the clarity issue that encourage the use of visual resources. When we look at a management report in the ministers are going to see that they are more easier to understand. The speed is very important too, which is very end of March. It's a deadline which is a very international good practice and a lot of incentives that information has some use, because we still a discussion about what happened last year. After that, every week goes beyond that. We lost the interest in the previous budget, and then we start to discuss about the next budget. This is a research that we did about the integrated report. 80% agreed, totally or partial, the adoption of this model is good. 85% from 249 UPCs agree, total or partially, that these reports contributed to the improvement of the governance process of the UPC.
Bom, aí chegamos aqui à decisão
Now
normativa
we are in the norms
22,
decision
que ela inova principalmente
198 of 22, with auditing and certification of accounts. It consolidates all the advances that we have and innovates in the stage of auditings. And I'm going to highlight, in especially the ones that are in yellow, what is a significative UPC, what are the criteria of conformity and materiality, and in the end, I'm going to explain the certification. And this is a process with very regulated with international rules, accounting regulamentations, so it's like a commodity in the auditing world. And the conformity certification is not so well utilized, compliance. It's not so well used, and that interferes directly in the way that we are going to use those criteria. In the definition of the balance, we have two criteria. The first one is this necessity to have 9% of coverage of the accounts of federal accounts. It's about the expenses and also the assets from the information of the active assets of the federal activity assets. And the social participation. We have this data showing the slide. So we have almost 90%. We have 6 ministers with annually account information report. These ministers are going through an auditing and a judgment annually. Economy, health, defense, education, and the second criteria is to have more than 2% of the federal budget. So we have accomplished this criteria, and the others are less than 1%. They got into that because of the assets are showing the slides. If I'm not mistaken, this year's infrastructure, next year regional development. Another thing that we are going to have is the levels of materiality. The guidelines say that this decision-making of the team, audit team, how we did that certifying work, and also the internal control bodies of the judiciary and legislative. That's why I think it's important to set the same standards, that we could have 2% of error. So it's going to define which is the percentage that's going to affect the opinion. Less than 2% doesn't affect. And half of that we can reduce to select the accounts that's going to be an object of the planning, of the auditing. And this reduction of the level of materiality is to increase the width of the work, so we can want to widen this on this work, what we call that as a limit for distortion, from where I can consolidate the errors. Below that, the errors are ignored. and all of that following the
Aqui é um exemplo,
auditing
né, que a gente vê como
international
é
standards.
feito
This is a
esse monitoramento e
model to
execução da
see
execução
how
normativa
we are
84,
going to do in the
das
first
unidades
year
prestadoras de contas significativas
the
para aquele
UP
exercício. Nós tivemos aí
significative
para efetividade de
UPC
demonstrações financeiras
to the
todos que foram
reliability
notificados,
of the financial
só o faz uma
demonstrations.
ressalva e provavelmente porque ele já passava ali pelo terceiro ou quarto
And we
audit
have this
consecutivo.
going through the third or the fourth
O
audit.
detalhe é que esse retrata muito
And
da instituição,
this is a
não é
picture
a
of the
gestão do momento.
institution. It's
Ela
not the
retrata a
management,
realidade dos
current
setores, dos
management.
sistemas que aquela instituição tem, que devem ali ser
They
direcionados para
should
garantir a
be
conformidade das
directed to
demonstrações
assure
financeiras
the
e a conformidade da gestão sanitária.
reliability on that.
Então, cada um tem um nível de
So
gravidade, um nível
each
de
of them
complexidade e
has
precisa de um plano de ação ali para conseguir
plan
aprimorar
of
os controles
action
e
to improve the
buscar
controls,
algumas
and
ressalvas nessas
six,
duas perspectivas.
with a lack,
Ponto importante
don't have a
é
lack of
que
opinion.
essa
A very
opinião do
important
auditor
point
não
is that
vai
opinion
limitar o
is not
julgamento, ou
going
seja,
to
o
link
julgamento ele
the
não é uma
judgment,
instituição, ele é uma
accountant
secretaria
judging by
que vai no rol de
TCU.
responsáveis na alta administração daquela instituição. Se tiver uma não
If we
conformidade da
have a
administração, vai ser feita uma
non-conformity,
matriz de
that's going
responsabilização para ver
to have an
efetividade e
accountability
aplicabilidade daquilo que foi
of
detectado
what
e
was
como aquilo ali
detected and
foi alertado
how
pelo
it
dirigente da alta
was
administração à
seen
instituição.
by the high administration.
Os critérios de julgamento
The
são
judgment
os mesmos da
criteria are
9443
the
da
same
legislação
of
criminal de
the
2016.
8443 law,
Agora a gente traz aí
and we
talvez
brought
uma clareza maior
a
nos
bigger
processos
clarity
decisórios,
in
nesses
the
critérios.
decision-making
Esses dois caixas de
process.
cima, exatidão das demonstrações contábeis,
The
legalidade, legitimidade e economicidade da gestão,
all that
são
they're
muito
showing the
conectados com
slide
a
are
etapa da
very
certificação.
connected
A gente
with the
faz
certification
usando essa
stage,
metodologia.
where we use this
E
methodology.
as quatro caixas de baixo
And
são as hipóteses
in the
de
bottle
irregularidade.
are the judgment
E,
hypothesis by
em algum momento isso pode
irregularity.
surgir de qualquer
In
ação
some
pública
moment
externa,
that could come from
nas
any
duas
external
últimas
action
são
in the
tratadas em tomadas de contas especiais e as duas
bottom
primeiras
two,
em qualquer tipo de tomadas,
and
tanto as contas anuais quanto as
it
TCS,
depends on
e
the
a tomada aplicando
scenario.
em temas a tomada de contas ordinária. A instrução normativa também traz essa
The
possibilidade, tem alguma outra
guidelines
condição,
brings a possibility.
se puderem fechar.
I think there's an open
Cada
audio.
um desses não
If you can
significativos
shut
nós
down
temos
your
esse processo
audio.
decisório. Se tem
We have
índice
this
de irregularidade
decision-making
acima daquela
process.
irregularidade, nós vamos avaliar
It's
eficácia
showing
da
the slide.
maturidade.
We are going to
Nossa
evaluate
próxima
that,
etapa,
and then
nosso
we are
plano.
going
Se
to
não,
the next
vai para a
stage.
implementação e vai ser tratado
So it
no processo
depends
aplicável no
on the
tribunal.
way it
Se
takes.
tiver acima da materialidade, vamos para a segunda pergunta. Se tem dano
So we are
erário,
going
se
to
não
follow
tiver,
the
uma
question
tomada de
boxes and
contas
then take
ordinária.
the decisions.
Se tiver dano erário, vai ser uma TCE. Bom, isso aqui é para
This
mostrar
is
que
to
toda essa
show
discussão
that all this
não
discussion,
se
it's
refere à estratégia
not
total do TCU. Isso é uma parte da
about
atuação do
the
tribunal. É uma linha de
TCU
controle, uma
strategic.
cadeia de
It's
controle
just
do tribunal que
value chain
considerar esses
of the
valores de
court
transparência e
to
credibilidade das contas
have
públicas. Então, ele é
transparency
um
and
processo focado
reliability
na
of the
fiscalização
public
financeira do controle de
accounts.
contas anuais, mas temos outros três
So we
também,
have other
que são
three too,
complementares a
which
ele, a
are
fiscalização de conformidade, que foi originada
supplementary
pela
to
modalidade de
the
finanças
main
regulares,
ones
fiscalização de desempenho e responsabilização administrativa,
that
que
is
combinam aqui
showing
com esses
in the
valores
slide,
em verde deste
that are
plano.
linked to
Segurança jurídica,
the
econômica e
values in
compliance,
green.
eficiência, eficácia, efetividade de políticas públicas e integridade da gestão pública. Então, essas são as quatro
These
perspectivas de
are the
atuação do
four
TCU.
perspectives
Vamos
of
à última parte da
act in
apresentação, falar
TCU. The
agora
last
da
part,
certificação de
we are
conformidade
going
financeira.
about, we are
A gente
talking
fez uma
about of
pesquisa de
the
2013
conformity,
com 22
certification of
instituições superiores de controle
conformity that are made by
perguntamos em que
the
medida as
higher
auditorias de conformidade
auditing
estavam
court.
integradas
So
com as
we
auditorias financeiras,
asked
que era
if
o objetivo
they
perseguido,
were
que isso era uma boa
integrated.
prática
I
em
realized that it was
alguns
a good
casos
practice in
concretos,
some cases,
e essa pesquisa, de certa forma,
and this
confirmou
research
que a auditoria de
confirmed
conformidade é muito integrada com a
that
parte
it's
financeira, em
very
alguns casos é
integrated
totalmente
with the
incorporada,
financial one, and some cases
e
totally
outros em alguma
integrated,
medida,
and
e
some of them in
isso não
some
é
measure
tão somente essa
it's
conformidade mais financeira. Por quê? Porque
In the financial audit, we have the whole evaluation of risks and controlling that are going to help in the reliability and the execution of the budget. We are going to talk about the specific themes of every process and the kinds of audit. And we'll talk about the substantive tests. We are going, as in the financial audit, are going to do the process as the manager did.
Documentou, fez o registro contábil, chegou na demonstração financeira.
And it's a
O
process.
auditor vai fazer o percurso contrário, vai sair da demonstração financeira para o registro contábil, depois para a
And
documentação, para ver se aquela transação
to see if the transaction happened and to see if the budget has the transaction had authorization. So these four boxes, the first one in the top, are very common in the financial audits to see if the transactions happened. And if you are not registered in the accountability, the two in the bottom are very common. It's the follow-up of the process of the budget, if there are financial or budgetary. And we still have in the law, in the norm, a minimum level that's demanded to verify an eligibility error and a calculation error. We do that in certain level to the mandatory expenses in the human resource and the mandatory expenses. So we have the profile of the expenses, 90% of human resources, 10% of hiring, transferring, and investments, and the others like health and education have a specific value in the municipalities and states. So this evaluation of the expense profiles interfere in the certification. The strategy changes, and this process, it's very expensive, so we need to integrate with the continual controlling based in data of social benefits and workforce. This is a picture of the percentage of not authorized payments, like the emergency auxiliary. And in 18, we had an estimative that was 18%, 8%, and these were canceled about 7%. So these are the last three lines are the rates of detection. Only 4%, 0.4%, 4%, and 7%. In the payroll of the human resource since 15, we had that controlling. So we have this picture of the amounts of irregularities in the human resource. We have in a way that the management can correct that, the irregularity during the financial fiscal year with this correction. And that's a model that seeks to integrate the controlling. In the two opinions, we have the conformity that has in the methodology the evaluation of trust, and the continual fiscalizations. We have the methodology with the evaluation of the quality of data and make some cross data. So to end, how the other countries do? It's a spoiler that we are going to see tomorrow and Wednesday. Tomorrow you're going to see the USA experience, the estimative of
no modelo que a gente observa, tanto no Brasil quanto nos outros três que nós
the
vimos no
undue
papel,
payments.
mas, em medida, nós temos patamar,
We
se nós
have a
compararmos com o
level
total
that we
despesa.
can compare to the total expend.
Bem alto,
You
uma
can see
estimativa,
that the level is very high.
metodologia de uma auditoria,
We
uma
observe the
estimativa
audit
por
methodology
cada
for
inspetoria geral, por cada auditoria interna de cada
each internal
departamento nos
auditing
Estados Unidos.
in the United States.
Enfim, acaba sendo
And
modelo interessante
it's a
quando
very
você
interesting
encontra na ótica
model
da estimativa, onde a gente
in
estabelece
the
qual é o
estimative
patamar, qual é a capacidade de
look,
cada programa,
so we can see
que cada
what the
instituição
capacity
tem
of each
de prevenir,
institution has to
detectar e corrigir
prevent,
pagamentos
detect,
indevidos,
and
mas
correct.
também tem
But
aspectos
also we
do
have
departamento
the look
auditivo
of
que
the
faz
Treasury
basicamente
Department
esse
that
dinheiro que vocês
makes
fazem nos cruzamentos de dados, tem acesso
what we
a
make
muitas
in
bases de
the
dados do
cross
governo,
data.
faz o
So a lot
cruzamento
of
e alerta os órgãos
database in the
setoriais sobre
government
a
guides
possibilidade de pagamento indevido.
how they can
Na
act on
quarta-feira, a
that.
gente também vai ver o modelo de
On
Portugal,
Wednesday, we're going to see
tem
the
essa
Portugal
dupla
model
abordagem, essas
that
duas
has this
opiniões, no
approach. We
modelo de
have two
contas,
opinions
uma
in
sobre
the account
a
auditing
confiabilidade das demonstrações
and the
financeiras e outra sobre a
reliability
legalidade e
and
regularidade das operações que
how
estão
they
ali
operate on
registradas
that.
nas demonstrações financeiras. No Reino Unido,
In the
também tem duas
UK,
opiniões, e a curiosidade que fica,
and the
né, a gente está só
curiosity
trazendo
that we
provocações,
have, we
né,
are
eu estou
just
curioso
bringing
para
the
conhecer mais do
questions. We
modelo.
are very curious to know about that.
Aqui eu achei interessante
So
na
I
forma como
here
eles
I think
escrevem para
that
ser de
interesting how
regularidade,
they
né,
write
o gasto é
the
considerado
report
regular e o dinheiro fornecido pelo
about that,
parlamento é gasto em propósitos
to
pretendidos pelo
say
parlamento,
that
em que a
the
utilização dos
expense
recursos pretendidos
considered
pelo parlamento
regular
é considerada
when the
regular quando os recursos
money
foram
given
utilizados
by
da
the
forma
parliament
pretendida e
is
autorizada pelo
expended with
parlamento.
purpose.
No Tribunal de Contas Europeu também
In the
essa abordagem
European
dupla, né, que nós já
Court of
acompanhamos sobre
Audits, they
legalidade,
have an
e
opinion about
no
legality and
ano de 2020,
irregularity.
por
In
exemplo, esse exemplo que eu trouxe
2020, for
aqui,
example,
teve uma opinião adversa
it
para
has
a
a
Comissão
different
Europeia,
opinion for the
porque era o
European
patamar
Commission. What's the level
de pagamentos indevidos, de
of
irregularidade na execução da
undoing
despesa,
payments?
foi de 2,7%.
And it
A
was
corte material deles também é de
2.7%, and
2%.
the
Só
cohorts
apenas
are
um exemplo.
2%. Just giving that
E, bom,
example.
o mais
The
interessante
most
nesse
interesting
modelo
about this
é
model
ter
is to have
a compreensão de
the
que
comprehension
o
that
controle, interno do
the
gestor é o
internal
mais
control of the
importante.
manager is the
Ele
most
tem que funcionar
important.
e
He
todas as
has to
outras
work, and the
linhas de defesa estão
others
lá para apoiar,
defense
para melhorar
lines
esses
have to
controles e
support and
garantir
to
que o
improve this
crescimento de cada
control
instituição
and strengthen the
execute orçamento que
institutions
protege
that
patrimônios sob sua
execute the
responsabilidade.
budget and have
E,
accountability.
então, exatamente por isso que a responsabilidade
That's
primária
why the
é do órgão,
primary
da instituição que está
responsibility
executando o orçamento
is
que
in
protege o
the
patrimônio. Claro, em
institution
alguma medida,
and
as instâncias
in
civis, né,
the levels
se relacionam com o
that
gestor, né, os órgãos
related
centrais
from each
de
other with the
orçamento,
central
de administração
body,
financeira, de
with the
contabilidade, controle,
financial
só
administration,
tem um papel
accounting
importante de
has an
regulação e
important
orientação
role
de
of
supervisão
regulation,
dos órgãos
supervision,
setoriais,
and
e a
guidance
auditoria,
in the
tanto TCU
sectorial
quanto
bodies,
TCU,
and the
tem um papel de
audit, CGU
certificar
and TCU had to
e dar essa
certificate and
visão
give
sobre o nível
this
de
vision
regularidade
about
das
the
ações de
level of
orçamento e, por trás dessa
regularity
informação,
in the
dizer
budget,
qual é a capacidade daquela
and say which
instituição
is the capacity of the
de cuidar e
institution
executar o
of
orçamento que está sob sua
executing
responsabilidade.
and
E essa é uma preocupação
process the
muito
budgets that's
importante.
under
A
them.
gente tem que olhar
So
para a
that's very
qualidade das
important. We
instituições
have to
e
look the
ver
quality
em
of the
que elas são capazes
institution
de
and see
executar o
if they are
orçamento delas.
capable to execute their
Bom,
budget.
finalizei.
I
Agradeço
finish.
mais
I
uma vez.
thank
Agora eu vou a palavra para o nosso
my,
conselheiro, para que ele conduza o debate.
and now I give the
Ainda agradeço
floor
aqui os nossos
to
participantes, Júlio, Bessa,
Julio,
Leonel.
Bessa,
Prazer estar aqui com
Leonel. It's a
vocês.
pleasure to be
Vamos ao
here.
debate. Muito obrigado.
Let's debate. Thank you very much. We thank you, Dr. Thiago Dutra, for your lecture. We passed the time, not that's worse, but I was impressed by the numbers. We didn't talk about
travou aqui. Também, né?
Following our event, I have the honor to present Dr. Julio Alessandro. He is the Assistant Secretary of the Treasury. He's analyst of the Central Bank, several positions in the economic field. He worked at CEPLAN. It's assistant in SAST. Dr. Julio Alessandro, you are going to have 10 minutes to give the vision about the Treasury Secretary and budget, how you're going to do to show how they are going to testify your accounts. I thank you for your invitation and to participate in such an important seminar. The Secretary of Treasures, it's a very relevant team. I would like, it's a satisfaction to be here with the Bessa and Leonel, to congratulate Dr. Tiago that show the details and the main points of the model. I say that's a very relevant model of the public account, and we are in a very important moment to discuss this controlling, and it's a convergence moment in auditing and controlling to have international standards. So I apologize. I prepared just a few slides to show how is going to be my participation in this debate. I'm going to share. Can you see my slides? In this initial part, it's about the debate that we have. Challenge and tendencies and trends to the control of the public expenses. The control of public expenses and something that creates a hard time for the execution of our budget. And I think that this new model can contribute a lot with that. So just to provoke, we have the most long series since 1997, so it's an increased trajectory of 14% of GDP, and it's almost 20% of the current GDP. So it's macroeconomic level. A more taxes load, a higher taxes load. Since 2016, what's very important to not look the other variables, but to focus on the public expense to avoid that the debts increase. So we are in a journey of stabilization of the public expense. If we think that we are going to have above 19%. But this healthy journey of public accounts, we have some challenge that we need to face in the budget process. It's important the rigidity issue. We have mandatory expenses that are increasing besides the reforms that we had recently. and the controlling of the human resource expense, it decreases the space of the discretionary expense. So it makes hard the execution and the planning of several public politics. So we have the imposition of resource. So the allocation of at the end of the year, it could be committed in the current process. So we have to face that challenge. Those were some slides that I would like to highlight. And here I stop my slide sharing to say, to share my initial vision of the Secretary of Controlling, the Secretary of Treasury and Budget, about the issue of what we can do in this challenge of improve the budget control. I think that, as Dr. Thiago said, we have to have an integrated process between manager, the second line, and the audit, with us in the treasury and budget bigger view, try to improve the quality of the institution, working on the institutional articulation, offering guidelines, strategic guidelines, improving the information, available information about budget and financial administration, so we can have a better view of the budgetary process and then help the efficiencies of the public politics. This is my initial speech. So I wait the next point so we can have a deeper debate. We thank you, Dr. Alexandre. Congratulations for your exposition. It's very pertinent. It was in a very good time. Now I give the floor to Dr. Francisco Eduardo de Holanda Bessa, our colleague who is a chief of the assistant of internal control of the minister. He is graduated in Ceará University, Federal Audit of Financials and Control of CGU, worked previously in CGU and Chief of Staff, has a very large experience, and it's certified by the Internal Audit Institution. So, Dr. Bessa, for your brief considerations, I'll give you 10 minutes. Thank you, Inaldo. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Thiago, secretaries, Julio, Alexandre, Antonio Leonel, Inaldo. For this first round, I want to make some observation how complete and deep this presentation that Thiago did. So we can think together about the evaluation of the model. I think that's the question that we need to think. So we need to improve. We are not stopped on that. The first reflection that I want to say is about the integrated report that the previous movements in the account movements, we have some data that shows that, indicates that They are now render account in a more efficient way. So that model adds a better way. When we talked about the regular accountability, we are talking about to render accounting to who? I think that the manager answered to that provocation in the sense that the integrate report give them the possibility to show the delivery with more clarity. So give them the possibility to evidence their value chain and the notion of public value delivered. The economy minister was the pilot experience. That was not suffering, but we can see the strategic management that did this exercise, which was very valuable for the possibility that the Ministry of Economy has to following and made an integrated report of 100 pages. I remember that when Tiago talked about that, we had this magic number, this reference number, that the report could not be over 100 pages. Because previously we had thousands of pages. In this kind of report, the managers is communicating with the society. So he's communicating with these people, Thiago, Laudo, Leonel. We are talking about the society. Who is this society that we have to handle accounts? Let's talk about is the average citizen. Is it true that become more pleasure and more efficiency the reading of this kind of report in which I could not be an economist to understand what the Ministry of Economy did? So the Ministry of Economy says what they delivered with governance structure they did, with the amount of incomes, and how they can show the accounting demonstrations that were consolidating these deliveries. I can say that to the average citizen, when you say about which resource and what's the results that we have, it's not of the interesting of the average citizen. So I think that in the other reports we can talk to them, and the citizens like to see things that are more fancy. So how the power structure is made, how the decision making is made, the chain of values is that, the public value was that, and that interests to the average citizen. When you talk about the execution of the budget, I have the impression that we have an interesting gap. We have different interests in a way that the chapter 3 and 4 of the integrated report, I'm talking about what I use in the terms of budget resource that result in this execution. It's not the interesting of the average citizen. This is good to the certification and the judgment. Fortunately, separate in the UN 84. I think it was fundamental that what I'm saying is that I think that we still have a gap in the integrated report, which we're talking about governance and delivery. But in the time of the financial audit to do the certification, the CGU or TCU. In the case of Minister of Economy, in the last 3 years was TCU, Thiago. In the UN 84, that the court could do that. Society is not interested in the certification. So when we translate that this certification has the purpose to attend the user of the accounts information, I'm not sure if who is this user that we are serving when we have the certification. I don't think it's the society. We are talking about a more restricted group. It's not the less important, but they are qualified users. The academia, professors. It's not the society, because society do not take on the opposite what happens in the corporative, in the business view. These external agents do not make decisions based on communication. The ones who have stocks wait for the reports based on the certification. In the public sector, I think that I'm not sure if the entity that's waiting the certification to make any decision. Not saying that the certification not important, but I think that's an endogenous importance then to the external agents, who is the user of the account information certified, which I think it makes very sense in the business area, but I don't think it makes sense in the public sector. I think that, so is it the certification less important? No, it's fundamental, but to the internal users, the ones that not defense lines. It changed the way we did. So when the Minister of Economy offered, I'll give an example here. In economy, we have sentence 1202 with a certification made by the court to adjust the accountability. The users are us internally, are the lines, the first and the second line that use the certification made by the third line when the certification is emitted by TCU. I'm not going to call that a fourth line. Thiago, you know that. But when the certification is made by the TCU, there is a different approach which is very important. The slide, for example, that Thiago showed with the situation of the federal assets from 2014 changes, which not show bad expense of the resource. A series of assets, especially the RPPS, was not recognized and then start to be recognized. In what that changed the fact from 2015 that changed the process of decision-making of any agent that I'm calling as a citizen. In the point of view of the public manager responsible about the accountability, the National Treasury, we start to make a commitment that we cannot turn back. That we need to recognize some types of account to improve the account register. in the point of view of our commitment, first, second, and third line, with transparency and the adequation of the register. Or this assurance or this certification result in a better decision-making process for those who are users of the information, of the registers of the public accountability. So I need to debate that. Thank you very much. I thank you, Dr. Francisco. Your considerations. And me as an accountant, I want to debate very much this theme because it's something that, for me, it's very good to discuss. And I'm very happy when Brazil walks to have more asset accountability and follow the international rules. When you see this demonstrative assured by a higher body like TCU and international standards, I usually say to my students that public accountability is evolving from an external necessity because it emerges in Brazil do the lands that we got from that we took from the United Kingdom. So I want to discuss this theme, and it was fantastic. Following our afternoon, they had a lot of debates. Now I'm going to give the floor to Dr. Orlando Leonel, works in the TGU, and Dr. Antonio Leonel. I remember Valdir Pires, that gave significant role to our CGU. I always say that CGU, it's before and after Dr. Valdir, excellent Democrat, then had a work which is very successful in CGU. And I always remember him when I talked about CGU. He's graduated in law school and has a master's in economy, works in TGU, internal control of the Ministry of Economy. And you, Dr. Antonio Leonel, will have 10 minutes to make your considerations. I'm very satisfied with what I heard, very well organized.
O sinal caiu.
Eu estou aqui.
Cortou um pouquinho a conexão.
Inicialmente, agradecer ao conselheiro pela apresentação, pela moderação.
Thank you.
Realmente, fora o ministro Valdir, teve outro baiano.
Minister Valdir, we have another baiano, Georgianche,
também muito relevante.
Also relevant.
Tive o prazer de trabalhar com ele.
It was a pleasure to work with him.
Enfim, quero agradecer.
I want to thank you. I want to thank Thiago Dutra for the invitation, the court, to make such an important panel, an event that is fundamental to discuss public accounts, and to congratulate to create the difficulty created. So to me, because I have to be the last to
Mas,
speak,
enfim, eu acho que
I
inicialmente a
think
gente tem
that
que só
initially
deixar bem claro
we have
que
to make very
o
clear
avanço
that
das
the
contas,
advance
né?
of the accountings,
A gente viveu um modelo que
we
envolvia
had a model that involves
mais de 1.000 auditorias por
over
todas as
1,000
empresas,
auditings,
mais de 1.000 auditorias,
over 1,000
trabalhos
auditings,
que,
works
por muitas
that
vezes,
several
não tinham
times
tanto foco,
didn't
né?
have so
Não
much
estava claro
focus.
o foco do trabalho.
The focus
A gente chegou
wasn't
recentemente,
clear.
antes da implementação da
Before the
180, a gente
implementations
tentava
of, we
racionalizar
tried to
uma coisa que não
rationalize
funcionava
one
direito.
thing that didn't
Acho que o
work.
próprio Thiago Dutra
I think,
colocou
as
as
Thiago
várias
Dutra
formas
said,
de trabalhar no
the
tribunal,
other ways
e
of
eu
working the
enxergava isso na
court,
CGU, pelo menos, a gente queria
and to
enquadrar
do
todas
at
as formas de
least, we
trabalho
can
dentro da auditoria de
put
contas.
all the
E
ways of
realmente
work
ficava numa
inside
situação
the
impossível de ser
the
trabalhado
accountability, and
adequadamente.
sometimes that
Era,
was impossible to work
era
well
uma
with that,
dificuldade para os
and it
gestores, para a
was very
população, por
hard to the
muitos meses.
manager,
Eu
to
cheguei a ver
the
relatório de mais
population
de 1.000
was
páginas,
even
quer
harder.
dizer,
I saw
era
a
uma
report with
quantidade
over
absurda de
1,000
informações com
pages.
pouca
They had
qualidade para
a low
acesso da
quality of
população.
information and
Incluo a
access to
população
the
como a imprensa. A
population,
imprensa teve dificuldade de absorver
the
aquilo sem
press
uma
had a
tradução de
lot
um
of
auditor, né?
difficulty without a translation
Realmente não
from
era
an auditor.
modelo que a
It
gente pode dizer até
wasn't
democrático, né?
a
Porque
democratic
realmente
model.
dependia de
They
técnicos muito
depend
bem
of
informados
very well-informed
naquela
technicians
tipo de execução de auditoria
in
para
the
conseguir
type
traduzir
of
isso.
execution,
A
auditing
efetividade,
execution.
existia bons
The
trabalhos nas auditorias de
effectiveness,
contas,
we
mas
had
eu
good works
provoco meus
on
auditores
the
aqui, falando que o modelo anterior,
auditing,
as
the previous
auditorias de
model
contas que eram boas,
that was
boas,
good,
né? Eu
were well
provoco isso em
done,
qualquer
could be
outra
done
auditoria.
in
Eu
any other
exatamente o ponto.
auditing, not only accounting.
O relatório de gestão do
The
gestor, não dá nem para
management
comparar.
report, we cannot
O
compare.
relatório integrado hoje
The integrated
enaltece
report
a
is
cadeia de valores
better
que vai ser
and
entregue à
brings the
população.
chain of values that's going to be
Eu
delivered to the
vou aceitar a
population.
provocação
I'm
do
going
BES em
to
relação a
accept
isso, principalmente a
the
questão
best question
das demonstrações contábeis
regard to
anteriores.
that,
Isso
the
eu
previous
acho que a gente consegue
accounting
justificar
demonstrations.
claramente a
I think we
proposta.
can justify and see the
E
purpose on that,
comparado com um modelo que não
and
tecia as
compared
caixinhas
to
antes dos ministérios.
a model that
O modelo
bring
era assim,
up
o
the
gestor de recursos
boxes.
humanos era um gestor. E
The
ele
manager of
apresentava como
human resource were a
então,
manager.
assim, chegava
So
nesse ponto.
we had this point
Gestores da área MEI
that
apresentando
manager
resultados
in the
como foram
median area was
resultados
presented by themselves,
E era
and
relatório que também
they had a report
bastante complexo,
that were very
enormes, eram
complex,
relatórios enormes,
very
que não
they
definiam
were
a cadeia de valor para o
huge
cidadão.
and didn't define
Então,
the
um relatório
value
integrado
chain
desde
value to the
94 inscrições.
citizens. So this model of report
Vou
came
defender esse
to
ponto,
resolve
principalmente a
several
questão das demonstrações
issues,
contábeis, porque
especially to the
eu enxergo a
accountability
instituição
demonstration. I
CGU
can
como
see
sócio e
CGU
parceiro
as
do
a
tribunal
partnership of the
IN.
Court of Audits.
Lógico que aqui a IN é do tribunal, mas foi amplamente
It
discutida com a
was
controladoria
very well
antes
discussed
dessa
with
edição.
the controller
Eu
in their
acho que
edition,
as demonstrações
and
contábeis
the
ainda
accounting
não ter a
demonstrations
eficiência, né, o
showing
grau, assim,
we don't have
como o
a
Bressa falou,
level, as
a
Bressa
governança de
said.
resultados está
The
muito clara,
governance is very clear
está com acesso à população,
and
enquanto as
has the
demonstrações contábeis
access to the
ainda não têm
population.
esse
And
atingimento para a população. Eu posso dizer o seguinte,
I can say
os
that
próprios pontos de
the
relatórios de
points
auditoria,
of the
eles,
auditing
lógico,
reports,
se espelham nos
they
números
mirror
contábeis,
the
mas
financial numbers.
quando vai se desenvolvendo a auditoria
When we
financeira,
develop
ela
the
vai chegar
financial
na auditoria
auditing,
conformidade
it's going
e
to
muitas vezes na auditoria operacional.
reach an
A boa auditoria
operational
financeira,
level.
quando a gente consegue
The
executar
good
os
audit,
passos
we can
integrais, a
execute
gente
the
consegue fazer um
steps. We
circuito
can
que vai
do
mostrando
a
que
circle
aquela
that
repercussão
shows that
daqueles valores
repercussion of those
vão
values are going
atingir
to reach
resultados para a população,
results
né?
to population, for the
Eu
population.
acho que
I think that Thiago talked about some of them, especially the part of the benefits, but I'm going to talk about some that weren't clear for the manager. And then we did the financial audit, was clear. Like in FND, we showed the possibility.
não execução das garantias do
The
FIES,
assurance
a União estava deixando mais ou menos 4 bilhões e meio de
of a
reais na mesa.
university program that had some issues, and it was
Na questão do FGTS,
stopped by the
houve uma discussão sobre o valor
and
patrimonial
the
do FGTS que tinha uma repercussão na
FGTS had also had a
havia valor
repercussion.
patrimonial maior e
We
quando se
have a
reduziu,
higher
houve uma
asset
discussão
value, and then
sobre a redução da taxa
when
de
we
administração
decreased that,
que isso repercutiu nas contas
it was shown in the
FGTS, que sobrou
accounts
mais
of the
Então,
FGTS
daí eu vou
workers.
pegar mais um exemplo.
I'm going to give
A
another
questão da
example,
saúde.
like the
Até
health
recentemente,
issue.
não tinha
Recently,
clareza
we
a
didn't
questão
have any clarity
do perdimento dos estoques de medicamentos na
when
saúde. Não
we
existia
lost
essa apuração. Não tinha
the
clareza, não havia
stocks of
materialização
medicines.
desse resultado.
We did not have
Graças
this
à
result
auditoria
shown.
financeira, hoje
And
está em
thanks to the
debate
financial
esses
audit,
estoques de
we
medicamentos
can
para
debate
saúde.
that in the
E
Ministry of
isso
Health.
vai garantir
And that's going to assure a better
desses
supplier of
em
these
todo o país.
medicines all over the country.
A gente está avançando também
We
num
are
tema bastante
advancing
forte
in a very strong
que
team
acaba desfocando as
in
políticas
which to
públicas, que é a
take off
questão da
the
judicialização, a parte da
take the
saúde.
focus of
A
the
saúde
public
também não tinha
accounts.
dados
Health
de
didn't
qualidade
have
para isso,
quality data,
citando vários pontos que foram resultados de
so we have
inadequações
lots of
das
results with
contábeis, e no
adequations
final das contas
of the financial
vai
statements.
atingir a política pública e o
It's going
atendimento
to
do cidadão lá na
reach
ponta.
the
Então,
citizen in the
eu tenho
end.
clareza hoje
I'm sure
que
nowadays
isso
that
fica muito mais profissional.
it's more
Antes, o gestor,
professional before the
quando uma auditoria de
management.
contas
When they
era assim, um
have
cheque em branco,
audit,
pronto,
it's
você podia usar qualquer
a
coisa,
blank
da mais
check
insignificante até a mais
for
relevante.
everything,
Hoje, ele
to
já
the
sabe que
most
vai estar no
simple to the
centro
most
da entrega dos
relevant.
valores e
And
das
today they
demonstrações
know
contábeis
that they are in
mesmo,
the
vai
center,
estar relacionado
and they are going to be
a
related
auditoria financeira vai
to
estar
the
relacionada a esses
financial
temas.
audit.
Ele consegue
They can
focar nos
focusing
assuntos porque
in
isso é
the
extremamente
subject because
objetivo
it's
do que a
very
gente vai ser
objective
discutido.
what's going to be discussed.
Eu quero
I
reforçar
want to reinforce
que
that.
O tribunal mostrou
The
valores
court
significativos de
shows
correção
significant
demonstrativa.
values
Nós
to
apoiamos o
the
tribunal nessa atividade,
statements. We
mas
support the court
no
in
jogo da
this
blitz, só nas
activity,
auditorias
but
financeiras
only in
da
the
Controladoria
financial
Geral da União
audit
foram
of TGU,
148 bilhões de reais
140
corrigidos
million
de distorções
reais
nas demonstrações contábeis.
correcting the
Algumas delas
Some of them have repercuted in the delivery for the public politics, but what I think it's more important is to have the quality of information to be appreciated, so that the person can know that today I can say that from 5 years to now, we can read and study the demonstration for accountability to take better decisions.
o gestor já pode
The manager
criar mais
can trust better in the demonstration, accountable administration. The academics can study how the financial health of the bodies are.
Então, e lógico, a
And
população
of course, the
vai ter mais
population
dificuldade
will
quando
have
ela
more
for
difficulties, but when
ela
they
vai ver
see
que
the
está
report,
relacionada à entrega de
they
valor
see that
patrimonial.
it's related to value delivery to the citizen.
Ponto que eu gostaria
So what I would like to
reforçar como
reinforce
preocupação, né?
as my concern,
Conversando muito com a equipe técnica do tribunal,
it's a concern I have talked a lot with Thiago Dutra,
pouco mais tempestivo do tribunal,
which is regarding more tempestive judgment from the tribunal.
do tribunal,
I understand the judgment from the tribunal, but
como há muitas definições
since there are several definitions of the budgetary flow in this financial audit, it would be very good to have a quicker judgment. Even for the management, you have a better clarity of how the judgment was. This morning we saw that we have difficulty to act in the public administration because of the several norms we have in the budgetary system. We have several difficulties from the constitutions, from the portary, and these difficulties the managing from the manager. They are not trivial questions. So the understanding from the tribunal would enlighten some positioning in terms of the accounts and would make the way to the correction of these topics easier. So regarding the certification, I see that today the responsibilization of the manager should be seen with a lot of detail because these are problems uh, that have been administrated for decades and they are only corrected now. So it's important that it should not be schizophrenic to say that the person that uh, was in the during when we had this problem should be guilty. So this is a risk to blame only those who were at the moment we discovered the problem. So this transparency of the accounts would diminish the tension, so people can understand that what we are discussing is not only the responsabilization, but it's the correction of the balances, so it can be more adequate to what we need. So these are the two concerns I bring up to the discussion: the quick judgment and this quick judgment exactly to take away some questions that we still have regarding the validity and also the certification of managers, because this is very recent. This can work also so the managers can also understand that it's a structural problem we are trying to correct. And even in the cases that it should not be, it is not a structural problem, you can actually see who is the guilty and to responsabilize this person. Because sometimes there is a manager trying to fix a problem and there is not somebody that's guilty because it was a historical understanding of how things should be done. And that's the fruit, these are the fruits we have now. So uh, this is the way we want to offer as a planning. And I thank you very much for being listened here. It was a great satisfaction to participate in this panel. Thank you very much. Once more, we thank Dr. Antonio Manuel. It was a very useful speech. I see that this afternoon is being uh, very good, and we are very good on time too. So we still have 60 minutes to go uh, to the closure of this section. So we still have good time to have the discussion. We have three questions. I will present these three questions, and each one of you will talk in 5 minutes, some comments. Uh, so I would say also that if any other person would like to say something, you can also talk. So, following the organization guidelines, I will say aloud a question, and each one of you can make some comments. First, Thiago, and after Dr. Leonel, and then Dr. Francisco. So we should not follow this order. If you don't want, if you want to talk later, it's okay. If you don't want to talk about this specific point, it's okay. There is not impeachment, so the opportunity is for all of you. Let's start our second round. One of the biggest challenges of the Brazilian budgetary process is in the strategic allocation of resources, not only from the political, social, economic priorities, but regarding the capacity of each governmental institution to allocate the budget in an efficient way. So, when one institution with low governance of inadequate controls present a budget, so it's temporary to offer uh, some budgets to them so they can uh, offer no results afterwards. So, what changes you think in the governance for the public services? You think that it would be necessary to have a better control of the accounts of each institution and the allocation of the finances too? Sometimes these institutions they go to the audiences to present some of their results. So does this measure also work in Brazil that is working in other countries? And in summary of all this contextualization, the main question is how the control of the public accounts can rule the uh, budgetary process.
Se eu puder começar, coincidentemente,
So, Thiago wants to start. So, since I know the questions, I
trazer
will be able
comparação aí com o debate eleitoral.
to make
Essa é a
a
primeira rodada,
replica of
o Júlio na
uh,
terceira. E dando
the electoral
continuidade,
process.
porque na
So I will make the first round and then leave to the others to the second and the third.
Bom,
So I
gostei da provocação do Bessa,
like
e
this
o
provocation,
debate é para isso mesmo.
and the debate is for that.
Você, uma grande liderança no Brasil para a melhoria da governança.
So we need to
Social do que interno.
to provoke this topic of the highest
Enfim, a
governance of
gente
Brazil for the
conversa
public
bastante, tem
uh,
oportunidade
governance.
de em eventos.
So have several opportunities to debate in the events, and with no doubt, it's always a very honest and open debate. And Leonel has already brought some points that I could also mention some others.
São algumas ponderações.
Some examples I would like to offer. The example I would bring up at first is the public politics that is more specific and accessible for our country. For example, in the pandemics, we had the emergency help. So it was a public politics very important, and people in the majority of the public politics, they are much more worried about the deliveries and the results, about the benefit concession, the way it's offered, if the amount of money is good for them or not. So people they are focused more on this. Well, not because we consider what people want. We are not leaving aside what is the operational and the political processes that we have to do in an inner way, but on the perspective from the control. We have several bodies of control to estimate the payment rate. And this was very scary to the population because when we estimated in 50 billion reais, and then we load that to 45 billions, and this is a topic that other than the estimation process, we had this data crossing work, and we could cancel like the benefit for 5 million people that we understood that they didn't need this benefit. They lost the benefit because they lost the requirements of eligibility. So this came to the Ministry of Citizenship. So the values of canceling, this is in the union. So we have an account there that is credit for damage to the patrimony, which has amount of 28 million dollars, million reais, of all the damages we got from people that were trying to do uh, not legitimate things. So this was also done to provide data for performance on the private sector, and then it was copied to provide also this information in the uh, individual individual level. So in the public sector, we have a model that normally looks at the result of the public politics, but it's natural to see this loss of information compared to the private sector. So we needed this connection with the of this financial connection, information connection. So we had these improvements. So uh, in this way, we had more information so that the Ministry of Economy could provide more the information that are uh, more objective regarding the model that we provided before. So this is more like the model in the United States, so that the ministry he can go and offer ask for the budget he needs, and also at the same time he is offering some of these accountability of his results. So this is the moment of maturity, institutional maturity that we don't have in Brazil yet, and maybe this is the opportunity we have now that we can have this system. We have to study, but the challenge is to have several intermediaries so we can get to the citizen. Maybe the National Congress is the body that we can have that, or maybe the press, or I think that it's important to have this translating this information that we have to the citizens. It's not easy to go to the citizens. It's not easy to make it useful for them so they can take decisions. Uh, I think the challenge is big, but this debate that we are having now can generate lots of fruits, and I think that the provocation was very good. And in the other rounds, I will uh, talk a little bit more about what Lionel and Julio can also mention. If anyone wants to add any other comment, I would like to also connect what. If you can raise up your volume because it's really low, but so I will try. Uh, so the so going along with the comments previously mentioned, I think the question is very interesting. How the accounts control can improve the budgetary process. We have several challenges. As I said before, we have a serious problem in the elaboration of the budget regarding the expenses which are obligatory and are fixed. You don't have much space to define, choose what to do. So our role here is to define priorities. Nowadays we have a budget that's very stiff, and we cannot know in the elaboration the needs of the public politics, what they need. Another problem that we have is in the execution. Generally, we are executing the budget, and there is still some decisions from the legislative and the executive that are affecting the decision, like laws that are being approved without being having the budget, votations that are taken down, people that are trying to put the expenses of some bills that they want to put into the budget. So this makes difficult our managing. Some other judicial decisions also have harmed some decisions we have to do. So in this, if this contest, this difficulty of the budgetary process happen, the control of accounts brings us very relevant information. It's very important for us to be out of that model in which you have more than 1,000 pages of report, because many people cannot see the value of it. And in this new model, people can actually see and understand better the information. This integrated model, we, as Rogério said, we are in a process and matured of public politics evaluation. We already have a cycle of 5 years of several evaluations with very good results. And the challenge is how to put that into the budgetary decision. So this will bring informations so we can discuss the budget. Today we still have a very stiff budget, and we do not have a space to make a discussion in a more qualified way. Some institutions that are strong in the politics, they can support this public politics. We cannot do that yet. We are still in this stiffness because the politics are standardized. So we need to have a better influence on that. We are creating a better set of informations so that when we have a window of opportunities to make reforms, we can propose them. So all these proposals from the CEMAC, the control of accounts and the people capacity, we can actually take this opportunity to see when we can prioritize the public politics. So I think the control of the accounts can be in this way too, in this growth of information, so we can have a better control of the public politics. Unfortunately, we have a execution that is very stiff. So we can make it better when we can have better uh, incentives to the managers to have more space to work. And this information, when this happens, will help the budgetary process. But nowadays, we don't have much space yet to advance on this way. But it's important to create this maturity so we can actually achieve this result. Any other comment regarding this exposal? I would like only to add a reflection regarding this feedback. I think it's a fundamental question in this debate because the way we operate today, feedback is not natural. It's not automatic. It's not a natural consequence. It's necessary to have goodwill, and even from the auditors that are issuing the certification, and obviously from the managers who are responsible for the choices and the design of the budgetary framework. What came to me when I was reflecting about this provocation. I think that the tribunal, I mentioned the tribunal because in terms of the works of CGU, this dynamic of the conjunct construction has already had some time, but in 2020 the tribunal had a very good step forward with the resolution 315. It can be very technical for those who are accompanying us here, but this resolution helped us to make to establish a conjunct construction with the manager.
Something that I read at the time that we had 315, it's going to be a revolution of controlling, because in fact, to the court, you and Inaldo are professionals that fight for the external control. So in fact, in my opinion, is one of the main documents of norms. If recently there that they are putting all the documents that you showed in your presentation. Why I'm remember this resolution? It predicts the sharing. So it's important to define criteria of audit and to realizing tests and then integrate the managers in the previous report to add in the interaction this question. In what the funds of auditing the errors of classifications that are revealed through this financial audit, in what these distortions could result in sources to reviews of the allocative choices and the budgeted design for the next cycles. How this question is not explicitly made when we are discussing the guidelines, and the questions making now because now it's comfortable to make these debates with now in a reasonable environment and satisfying environment. I'm giving a concrete example. When we receive the certificate from the Ministry of Economy, I'm going to say a number that could seem a dramatic number, but the court identify a classification distortion of taxes credit of 390 billion that were classified. So it was one of the mistakes that we have. It's a very scary number. We had in rate credit that we had a wrong classification. In the moment that we are discussing, there is a question that could be done and could lead us to a critical reflection, which is in what measure this fragility of control could result in a redesign of our choices in the definition of the next years. That question needs to be done in the moment because it's hot. The answer could be it's a distortion, relevant, important, should be correct, should be, but it's a distortion that not conducts us to any review about the allocative budget process, or on the contrary, yes, it's a distortion, as the example that Thiago brought about the lack of conformity of auxiliary payments that makes us lead us to a allocative review or reinforce that should be about the controls that the allocative choice should be efficiently made in the moment of the execution of the budget. We have an instrument, we have a norm that predicts that. The debate between the auditor and the auditee, this question that we are trying to answer, I think that could enter between the questions and reflections that we should make when we are discussing with the audit team the previous report.
Conselheiro,
Once more, I would like to,
Conselheiro Naldo, eu só
Counselor
queria,
Naldo, I would
queria
like
só complementar
to
aí.
complement.
Eu acho que o Júlio
I
e
think that
o
Julio
Bessa
and
trouxeram boas
Bessa brought
reflexões.
good reflections.
Eu acho, inclusive, que
I think
o
that
Júlio
Julio
conseguiu ler minha mente, né? Porque
could
ele
read my
pegou
mind
vários pontos
because he
importantes
talked
ali,
about several points that
SEMAP,
were
a questão
important, SEMAPI,
da
the issue of
como o orçamento está
how the
engessado
budget
dificulta a
is
implementação hoje,
stopped, what make
mesmo nos
hard the
motores, mas eu acho que o
execution,
Bessa
even
trouxe
the
uma
control,
preocupação
and
da
Bessa make a
questão
question about
como
how
fazer isso de
to
uma
do
forma mais
that in
natural.
a
Eu
more
acredito que
natural
sim.
way. I believe
É uma
that
questão de
it's
maturidade
a
mesmo. A gente tem que ser otimista com o
maturity
processo,
matter. We have to
né?
be
A gente
optimistic
saiu de um
with the
processo que não
process.
tinha nem
We
luz para
got
discutir
out
esse nível.
of a process that doesn't
Hoje a
even
gente
have
consegue falar
light.
como a gente
And
consegue
nowadays, we
propor
can
melhorias
see how we
com as
can
auditorias de contas.
propose improvements about
Antes
the
isso era
account
impensável, né? Assim,
audit.
então, o modelo
That's a
hoje
were
é ambicioso,
unthinkable. So it's an
né? O
ambitions
modelo
model.
é ambicioso
It's
e
an
tem
ambitions
condições
model and
de
have
fornecer
conditions
esse
to
tipo
provide
de discussão, né?
those kinds of
Prover esse
discussions,
tipo de
to
discussão.
provide
Eu provoco
that.
muito o
I
Thiago
always
Dutra
question Thiago
que
Dutra
o tribunal
that the court
sempre fica no spotlight quando tem um
always
julgamento
is
das
the
contas do
spotlight
presidente.
when
Na
they
realidade, hoje,
judge the president
cada
accounts,
ministério,
and
se ele
nowadays
fosse
every minister that had
avaliado
their
pela auditoria
uh,
fundiária, poderia ter um dia. O
accounts
Ministério da Educação,
evaluate. We could have a day about
Ministério da
that. We
Saúde,
could have
e
the
isso
day about
iria
the health
acrescentar muito à
Minister of
discussão
Health. That would
das políticas públicas.
add a lot of
Porque
the discussion
eu
about the public
reconheço
politics.
a
I
preocupação
recognize
do
that the
Bessa com
question
relação ao gap
about BES
do
with
conhecimento
of
das políticas
BES about the
públicas em
gap
relação a temas
of the
sociocontábeis.
recognition of the public
São dois
politics.
conjuntos,
We
às
have
vezes,
two
de pessoas que
groups
estão
of
discutindo o
people
gap.
that are discussing the
Não
theme,
o conjunto
not the group
que engloba essas
that
pessoas
has these people.
envolve política pública,
A
contas
involves
e as
public
declarações contábeis,
politics, accounts, and
normalmente
public
envolve os auditores do
showing
tribunal,
statements
da
always
CVM.
have the
Difícil
CDU,
você ver
so it's
alguém de
hard for you
fora
to see
com essa
someone from
condição para
outside with this
discutir
condition to
essa
discuss
intersecção.
this
Né?
intersection.
Eu não digo que é
I
impossível,
don't
o
say
Ministério
that
da Fazenda
it's
tem,
impossible.
em
Ministry
alguns
of Economy
setoriais
has
contábeis
some
tem também, mas
countable
assim, não é
sectors,
trivial
but
esse tipo de
it's
conhecimento.
not
Mas eu
important, this
acho que
kind of
quando a
knowledge.
gente
But I think
começar
that when we
quanto
start
mais a gente
as more, we
elucidar
need
esse novo processo, como a gente está
this
fazendo
new
hoje,
process as
abrindo
we are
essa
doing
discussão
nowadays, opening
para
this
o mundo
discussion to the
acadêmico,
academia
para a
field,
população em geral,
to
né?
the population in general,
Em especial os especialistas,
especially
mas
the
assim, qualquer
specialists.
poderia estar assistindo.
Anyone can watch
Isso vai,
that. I think
com
that
certeza,
this is going
facilitar
to make
esse
easier
tipo de discussão.
this
Então, eu
type
queria
of
dizer o seguinte,
discussion. So
hoje
I
o
want to
momento tem
say that
condições
today we have
de prover isso.
conditions to provide
Inclusive,
that.
tem instrumentos.
We
Eu
have
acho que o
tools to
Júlio foi
make
muito
that.
feliz
As
em
Julio
trazer a
said,
questão do SEMAP.
to talk about SEMAP,
A gente tem coisas
we have
que
things that
já conseguimos fazer
we
durante o exercício
already
financeiro.
did
Você vê
during
alguns
the
exemplos
financial
de coisas
auditing. We have
pontuais que
some
foram identificadas pela
punctual
auditoria
events
financeira.
that
O caso
were
do
identified in
FIES
the
é um
financial
dinheiro que
auditing, like
estava parado
FIES
lá no
was
vencimento das
money
dias
that were
e o Ministério da
stopped.
Fazenda entendendo,
The
os estados
warranty
entendendo a
issues,
possibilidade de utilizar esses
understanding the
recursos
possibility
que
to
estavam
use these
parados no
resources
no
that
fundo
were
das
stopped
garantias, que
in
era o dinheiro
the
na
warranty
mesa, né,
fund,
como o
which is
pessoal
the money on the table,
fala,
as the
ele decidiu
as
usar.
a
Isso não
saying
usou de novo.
says, it
Então,
could be used.
isso só é possível
That's
porque o
possible
modelo
only because the model
dá essas
is
condições.
gives this
É
condition.
suficiente ainda? Não.
It's
Ainda não
that
é.
enough?
Mas a
No,
gente
it
tem que ter
isn't.
clareza
But we have to have the clarity
tem o
that
quê?
We had 3 years doing that in the plain way. So in 3 years, we have structural results that, as the previous model that has decades, we didn't do that. Of course, the CPPR had another movement, could have a wide discussion with the render of account of the president, and now they're going to have the results. So as an overview, I would like to say that I understand that I'm very optimist related to the process that's going to be strengthened and is going to help the decision making in the process. And we are going to have some limitation, as Julio said, the stop of the budget. We are ineffective. We have to spend X% on that. It's mandatory to spend money on something. We have our legal limitations that eventually, even with the legal limitations, we have to discuss numbers if they are adequate to be doing or not. Once more, I'd like to thank all the debaters, and now we are going to following with a round of questions. We have 3 minutes. One of the benefits of the new model is the certification based on risk and materiality. But on the other side, the management works with the tolerance of errors and assume the controlling that have to give safety to the society, and the use of public resource should be used in the law and need to be trustable. In these arrangements, we have a chain accountability to the highest manager take their responsibility. It demands that the low instance does the same, and each level have the accountability by controlling. In this scenario, how you evaluate the impact of the new model of the accountability of the high administration in every entity? In a simple way, how we could have the accountability in the process. I think as the original model, Thiago, you can talk about that, and then we can give the floor to the other debaters. Thiago. Thank you, Hinaldo. Excellent. Now is my chance to talk, to give an answer, a reaction. What about Lionel brought? This issue about accountability, the judgment, being timely. I really like this proposal. I hope we can discuss that internally. I think that's very good. We need to give light to this process. And maybe it's worth that we don't have the Minister of State go to the Congress to render account. At least we would have the opportunity to talk about the render of account of every minister. About the accountability, the last stage of the accounting process, I think that this stage in the regulatory structure of the courts not closed. We have a guideline about that. We have the norms that focus on the stage of auditing, and we have a resolution that's being elaborated that's going to guideline the internal procedures of the court with guidelines to the instruction of the process that's going to generate a process of judgment, of accounting. The challenges that we have is to evaluate the responsibility of every manager of the high administrations in the measure of their authority or of their capacity to alter that reality. As Daniel said, if you have a legacy, and this legacy is very common, the first auditing, we know that a lot of the issues need some years to be solved, and naturally, we are going to have the repetition of these foundings, of these non-conformities through the years. And I think that the challenge is in the capacity of the manager, show that, can prove that this opportunity is very important, and to show what has been done about the example. I gave the example.
O exemplo do Ministério da Fazenda, que teve abstenção de opinião em 2017 ou 2018, né? E o julgamento de contas foi sem.
The judgment from the accounts,
Não foi com ressalva, foi sem.
they are not with.
Por quê? Porque na plenária entendeu que.
So in the plenary, they understood that there was a proactivity from behalf of the manager to resolve the problem and, in some way,
apresentar plano de ação.
to present a action plan.
É esse, a gente enxergar.
So the challenge is to see this measure of the responsibilities. So we detected the non-conformability. So the problem is this, and what is the institution doing that here? So it will not be reasonable to see, to say, okay, it's a problem that it's been here for 20 years, but I have nothing to do with that. The view is, okay, we have a problem of 20 years, and this is a problem that I can do what I can do. So I have a very personal statement, which was audit that I did on INSS. So even the president, I investigated. So they were very high values, and it was a very bad mistake, and it was a mistake from the one that was trying to fix the problem that was there for 20 years. It took 10 years for solve this problem, but after this time we could judge the ones that were in management at that moment. Nowadays we are more mature to prevent these situations. Can I make a comment regarding this question? This question of judgment, I would like to make a improvement that I think it needs to be improved. I think that Thiago is improving that. I think the judgment of the CPF, the national ID, is away from the institutional, so this makes a delay. When there is a moment to judge the person, we have the impression that the assecuration was satisfactory, or that was done with some care, but 2 years later we see that the manager is surprised. So this approximation of this distance is very important for the process. The judgment right is focused on the person, not on the process. It's the role of the external body of control to focus on the person, because this brings normally a awareness, which is not a fear, because it has a bad connotation. We should have this awareness or this conscience that this audit on the person, which is foreseen on the Constitution, is fundamental. But on other side, when we talk about on the process and not on the person, the dynamic is of improving. We should have this this process to have the person judged. The manager should know that he's gonna be judged, but he will also have to collect some information so he can improve the process. If you can't find this balance, this judgment of the person can have a positive input. Thiago mentioned a very good example that reminded me of another example that happened here, and that Nicola will remember, which was the general of register, which was a topic discussed by this TCU for more than 10 years and finally was delivered with the participation of CGU 2 years ago with the title of SIP, which is the but this was needed in some moments that TCU threatened the person of the manager so that he could make them aware of the dangers for him. So this sometimes this can provide a very good effect. But if you only have this threatening, the manager will abandon the process. He will not help the process. He will abandon the dynamic that is to improve the process. So all the public managers should look for the enhancement of the process. But if you are threatening him, he cannot provide the information. So if he dedicates all the time, the energy to defend himself from the bad consequences that he could actually be attacked, so he will try to be all the time clean from all the bad consequences he could have. So the manager will wash his hands off like pilots, but I think that it's better to do the process as Ivan is, not to wash the hands, but to be clean, not to jump off the process. The public manager is not for the whole life. So, how many managers are passing through the process of of this project we have? So, it's important so that the manager can pass the responsibility for the next manager, and so that we can improve this process. So this balance between improving the process and judging the person is important to do. It's necessary to have this awareness regarding in this sphere to the my personal responsibility. But at the same time, we have to have this dynamics that the manager will pass the responsibility with more improved process to the next manager. I think this is a great challenge that we could discuss. Okay, the judgment of accounts is not a right to improve the process, but why not? Why should it not? But why the right of judgment of accounts cannot take into consideration the enhancement of this process? This balance can be useful when we think of account judgment. Any other comment? From my behalf, I would like to add, after this observation, I will focus more on my comment on the next question.
Bem, eu tô na linha do Júlio. Eu acho que se a IN viesse com uma gravação do
The NDS, we've had the recording for what Thiago said. This provides more term peacefulness to the managers. So that's mentioned what the managers are expecting
dessa,
from this
essa visão do tribunal,
tribunal
mas
view
vamos
perspective.
reforçar a
So
questão
again, I will only
tempestividade
highlight
do
the
julgamento,
question of
porque nos
the
primeiros julgamentos
tempestivity on the
as pessoas
judgment,
vão começar a entender
because in the first
e
judgments,
eu tenho clareza disso.
people will
De repente, só
understand
que
that,
eu tenho clareza o que o
at
o
least
Thiago está falando,
myself,
o
I
que vai
have clarity
acontecer.
of what will
Mas,
happen,
assim, quando tiver o
which is
primeiro
what Thiago is
julgamento,
proposing. But when we have the
isso
first
vai...
judgment, this
a gente vai focar nas
we will
questões
focus more
estruturais
on the
e não
structural
num
questions
conceito
and not
pessoal
on
de
the
responsabilização, na grande maioria dos
responsabilization
casos. Né?
point, which
Atualmente é
is
isso que acontece.
in the
Na
biggest
grande maioria dos
majority
casos,
of the
são
cases.
questões de legados
Many of
que
the
não foram
cases
discutidos durante
are
anos.
problems that have not
Então,
been discussed through the years. So
quando eu falo assim, mais de
more
95%
than
dos temas, dos
95%
assuntos que a gente
of
tratou
topics we
nas
have
auditorias financeiras,
dealt
pelo menos na
here in the
PGU,
public
estão
audits
falando de legados de
We are
anos.
talking about years
Então,
of legacy,
realmente
so
conseguir
is
identificar
to
o quanto o gestor pode
identify how much the manager could be committed to
aquelas questões,
solve that
não pode ficar
issues,
parado, não,
not
teve, eu vou
could
deixar
not
assim.
stop
Não pode
that.
acontecer isso, mas até que
It could
ponto
not
a visão do
happen.
tribunal
And in
vai
which
nessa
point the
linha.
view
Então,
of the
minha
court
grande
goes on that
preocupação,
line.
até mesmo
And my
porque é uma ferramenta
concern,
poderosa
it's
de
about
tomar decisão
it's a very important
para o
tool
país.
to make
Né?
decision to the
Eu sou
country.
entusiasta nesse nível. E daí,
So
se virar uma ferramenta de uma
if it
responsabilização,
turns as a
assim,
tool
às
of
vezes até exageradamente rigorosa,
very
a gente vai
strict
perder uma
tool,
grande
we
oportunidade de
are going
utilizar
to
como
lost
decisão, porque daí
the
todo mundo vai
opportunity to
querer
use this tool
engajar, né, naquela coisa
because
assim.
no one will
E esse vai ser um
want to
risco
use this tool.
que eu acho que não vale a pena correr.
So I don't think it's a
Por isso
very
que
good risk
tem
to
que ser
take.
coisas muito
I think
grosseiras
that
mesmo, de
could be very
abandono de
rude,
iniciativas, de
like
abandono
the abandon
de
of initiative.
correções para eventualmente uma responsabilização. Mas enfim, eu espero que nos
To
próximos meses aí o
accountability.
tribunal
I
consiga
hope that in the
trazer
next
os
months
primeiros
the court
passos
could bring the
dentro dos ministérios, né?
first results in the ministers.
Eu agradeço
I
mais uma vez
thank
a
you
todos
once more you
relevantes
for
contribuições.
the
Vou perguntar à
contribution,
terceira
and now we are going to
rodada de
the
perguntas.
third and last round
Hipoteticamente,
of
se os controles
questions.
instituídos na primeira
If the
linha de
control
defesa,
instituted in the first line of
ou
defense
seja, capazes de prevenir qualquer
would be
situação de
capable to
pagamento
predict
indevido,
any
as auditorias internas
undebt
e externas
of
não
payment,
detectariam
predict
nada.
any
Em outro cenário,
undue
se a
of
auditoria
payments.
interna
In
detecta
this
uma taxa de pagamento
scenario,
indevido da ordem
if
de
they
10%,
detect
em suas
the
recomendações
undue
atendidas para
payments
solucionar as causas desse
and
pagamento,
could
a
solve the
auditora, vez da auditoria
causes
externa,
of this payment when
obrigacional
the
concluir
external
será
accountability
emitir
this
uma opinião
problem will
sem
be solved,
recurso.
and
Isso
then they
disponibilizar
have an
também a
opinion
atuação de
without
cada instância de
any
controle,
comment.
sem focar
So
também em risco residual, que não foi suficientemente
it
respondido por
was
controles
enough
internos.
to
Nesse sentido, o
answer by
segredo
the
para o
internal
regime integrado de controle
controls.
está na avaliação
So the
de cada
secret
instância
is
de
in the
controle por
evaluation
parte
of
do gestor
every
superior,
level
uma
of
espécie de
control,
auditoria de
like
saída que
a
permite, é
trust
isso que
chain.
permite, por
That's
exemplo,
what's allowed, for
que toda
example, in
magistrada
all
de controle
the
tenha um pericial de
levels,
testes substantivos
had to have
sobre todos os
tests
atos
about all
contados,
the
onde os controles são bons,
acts.
testa-se o controle.
So
Somente
they are
onde
always
situações
testing the
substantivas são fracas
controls,
é que se parte para a
and
revogação dos
where
testes
we have
substantivos.
weak
Sobre essa
controls, then
perspectiva,
we
como
can
os
change
auditores
that.
avaliam o
How
papel
do you
do
evaluate the role of manager
dos controles
to
internos
strengthen
para
internal
essa
controlling
integração da
for
gestão dos
this
controles e
integration
execução
of
do
the
orçamento?
controlling
Resumo,
levels
quais
in
os
the
desafios para
budgets? Which
integrar
are the
as instâncias
challenges
de
to
controle
integrate
para
the
gerar mais
levels of control
eficiência e
to have more
credibilidade, para garantir a
efficiency,
transparência
to
e a
assure
responsabilidade no
transparency
uso do
and
orçamento e do patrimônio
accountability
público?
in the use of
O Tiago,
the budget?
com a palavra.
Tiago, please, you have the floor.
Obrigado, Inaldo.
Thank you, Inaldo.
Bom, eu acho que
I
a gente
think
dá até
that
para conectar muito
we
com o
can
que o Júlio disse,
connect
né?
with what Julio
Na primeira
said
rodada, né?
in the first round.
E um dos pontos que dessa
And one of the points that
Essa
Bessa
questão
talked
da
to,
rigidez do orçamento.
it's about the rigidity of the budget.
Que
It's a problem
impacta
that
todas as etapas,
impacts all the stage of the budget cycle.
precisa ser
In
tratado.
fact, it needs to be treated.
Mas não é impossível, né?
It's
A
not
gente viu, por
impossible.
exemplo,
We
isso na
saw, for
reforma da Previdência,
example, the
a
reform
gente
of
vê em
the
outros países, na
the
França, na Grécia, na Espanha, todo mundo foi para a rua.
retirement. What happened in Greece, Spain,
E aí,
the
depois de 3
population
anos de
went
debate,
out
a
to the
gente
street
conseguiu algum ganho, algum nível de
to do
consciência
some demonstrations, and
na
then we
sociedade
got
para
a level of conscience
aceitar, né,
to the society to
regras
accept
muito mais
rules
rigorosas.
which are more
Eu acho que esse é um
hard.
exemplo, talvez no nível mais macro,
This example, in the
para tomar essa
macro
decisão.
example, we
Agora,
have
nós temos
to
esse problema
treat
da
about the
despesa
human
primária que precisa
factor.
ser tratado.
So we need
Então, a
to
gente,
treat the
em
primary
alguma medida, a
expenses
gente não vai
in.
trazer isso no processo
We are not
de
going to put
diagnóstico
that in
completo,
the account process as
mas
a
a
whole
gente,
process, but
querendo ou
we
não, acaba atacando esses maiores
attack
problemas, porque
these bigger
a
problems
materialidade nos
because the
direciona para
materiality directs
esse
us
grupo
to
de despesas,
this
né, as
group
maiores, né?
of
E o mesmo para a
expenses,
receita,
and the same to the incomes.
E aí eu conecto
And
essa
then I
discussão
connected
com
this
o que Bessa
discussion with
trouxe, né?
what Bessa
Como é que a
said,
gente conecta essa
how we can
certificação,
connect this
o objeto da
certification
certificação,
in
seja ela
the
informação
object of
financeira,
the
seja conformidade da despesa ou
certification,
da receita, que a gente está focando
the
na despesa, mas na receita
conformity,
também, né? De que forma a gente conecta
in
isso
which
com o
way we
processo
can
social, com o
connect
processo
with the
societário. E aí
decision-make
eu diria para
process.
Bessa que não é só a
I said
alocação, né?
that's
A gente
not
tem
the
os
only the
objetivos, né?
allocation. We have three
Socialização,
goals
inovação
of the
e entrega
budget.
eficiente. E a verdade é o
So the
seguinte,
truth
a gente,
is,
como
we,
gestor,
the
tem
manager
que
himself,
ter
has to
essa consciência,
have this
né, essa clareza
conscience, this clarity
da utilidade da
of
informação.
the
Qual
use of the
decisão
information,
pode
which
ser
decision
influenciada
could
por essa
be
informação?
influenced by this
Qual
information,
decisão
which
pode ser
decision
influenciada
could
por uma
be
taxa de
influenced by
conformidade alta ou baixa em
conformity
determinada
rates
instituição, mostrando
low or
uma
high,
baixa capacidade institucional para cuidar
showing
disso.
low
E
institutional
a partir
capacity.
daí,
And from
direcionar
that,
a energia,
direct the
direcionar
energy,
investimento,
the investment,
capacidade gerencial e mobilização
management
internos, né,
capacity,
para cuidar
external,
disso, né,
internal,
cuidar
to
desse patrimônio.
watch
Então, aos
these
poucos, a gente
assets and
vai
this budget.
enxergando o tamanho
We
de
are
cada
going to see
problema,
the size
perceber o
of
tamanho
every
do problema da previdência e
problem.
trator, né? Agora, a
We
gente precisa enxergar o
treat
tamanho do problema pessoal
the
e
prevalence
tratar,
issue,
né?
and
Dar,
now
por
we are
exemplo,
going to
Bessa
treat the
trouxe,
other
né, da
problem. As
receita,
Bessa said, the
claro, não é
revenue.
trivial fazer essa conexão, a
It's
gente
not common to
pesquisou muito
make
sobre isso tudo,
this.
o ideal é até a gente pensar
We do
mais na
that a
parte
lot.
técnica
We have
mesmo,
to
assim,
think
talvez a gente
together.
esteja sofrendo à toa aqui, com uma
We are
conversa com você, a gente consiga
sometimes we
conectar a
can solve that
informação com a
with
decisão.
just a
Por exemplo,
conversation.
no lado da receita,
But in the
uma questão de
income side,
classificação,
the
tudo bem, a gente está
classification
falando curto e longo
side,
prazo aí,
we are
obviamente,
talking
mas pode
about
ser uma
longer short
classificação de
term,
tipo de tributo
but
na
could be some
previdência.
kind of
Isso pode
taxes
impactar, por exemplo, a
by
repartição de receita
revenue
com estados e municípios. Então, essa é uma questão
classification. So this is a
extremamente sensível.
politic issue which is
Eu já
very
recebi
sensible.
de parlamentar
I
um
received
pedido,
from
um calhamaço
congressman
de
a
informações para a
big
gente
book
auditar
of
essa repartição.
information, so I
Então,
can't,
é
so I
algo
had
que
to
tem uma
audit,
importância, que tem uma
and
sensibilidade
it's real
política,
to have
econômica, social,
access
e a
to
quantidade de
his
dinheiro que vai para os Estados
social
Unidos
and
influencia
political
na capacidade de financiamento
influences
político
that
público.
influence the capacity of delivery to the public.
Eu acho que é
So I
desafio
think
muito
it's a
grande,
very
né, para
big
a gente
challenge for us
compreender
to understand
em que medida
in what
o gestor
measure
pode se
the
apropriar
manager
dessa
could have
responsabilidade,
this
dessas informações sobre
responsibility, this
a
information
qualidade da
about the
informação
quality
em
of
nível
information
de
and the
conformidade
level
no
of
exercício do orçamento
conformity in the
para
budget
avaliar
execution to
como
evaluate
responder isso em
how
termos
to
de
answer
orçamento
that
e
in terms
planejamento. O
not
orçamento
only in
nada
the
mais é que o
budget but the
reflexo financeiro
planning.
do planejamento, né?
It's
Então,
the reflex, the
eu acho
budget is the
que
reflex
essa
of the
conexão não é
planning.
trivial,
This
mas
connection
ela é
is not
fundamental,
common,
porque sem o
but and
gestor
it's fundamental.
secretário financeiro, dificilmente a gente consegue
And
tratar
we need to treat
problemas
the
institucionais
institutional
que são
problems
muitas vezes legais. Né? A gente
that
sempre dou
sometimes
exemplo
are
das
legal.
minha avaliação pessoal é uma das
That's my
instituições mais
personal
importantes do Brasil,
evaluation.
gerencia 800 bilhões de reais,
They manage
claramente uma
800 billions
instituição
of
que não tem
reais,
condições
and
de
it's an
gerenciar um
institution
orçamento desse
that
tamanho.
don't
Então,
have
a gente
condition to
precisa
manage
falar isso abertamente.
budget like that. So we need to talk about that openly. We have a lot of good people, we have the technology, but it's not enough. A lot of money, it's an important institution, deserves investment, and we need to have clarity from this kind of audit that connects the institutional reality with the financial capacity, institutional capacity to take care about the budget and the assets.
Conselheiro Rinaldo aqui, só para pegar os pontos levantados que trouxe
Just to talk about some points that were mentioned by Thiago, what I think
a gestão aqui de tesouro e orçamento.
about in the point of view of treasure and budget. We have a lot to gain with the integration between the controllers. The biggest challenge that I see
Como essa informação
as this information arrives in an
decisão.
executive way to make decision. I feel lack of information that not come in the right moments, in the right way, and on a daily basis when we make decisions. We don't have the clarity to make the decisions, but we always try to seek and have those information, but in fact, unfortunately, our make decision process cannot look to the whole information, so we have the rigid problem. Sometimes we are tied up. So sometimes we cannot look to all information in the decision making. So we know that we have the need, this integration between the bodies. So to end my participation, as a final consideration, to highlight an overview about the treasury and budget, we have a public debt which is very high. So in the short term, we have the main goal as the fiscal policy should be measured to assure a sustainable journey. We looked at the primary result and we saw that the result was not favorable. We increased the incomes and the expenses, and when the revenue dropped, we increased the expenses. Not only look to the flow, look into the topics, we can treat better the assets that we have. So I think it's important to fight this debt so we have a more friendly journey. This, in the short term, is very hard. So to combine that with the encouragement to create fiscal spaces, then the public policies could be well evaluated and had the capacity to execute that well. We got into the issue that we don't have space, but maybe if you could evolve in this new model, with the experience, we can create a critical mass so we can face the reforms like the Previdence reform, the other administrative and taxes reforms, and when we have space to make decisions and put the rightful decisions and conciliate results to the population. It's a big challenge, but this articulation and this integrated report is going to help us a lot. So we have this new model. I thank you all my colleagues, Besso, Leonel, for their work in this area, and for sure they helped the managers a lot in this big challenge, which is manage the budget process. Just want to make a comment in the sequence of what Thiago Júlio said. In the perspective of the managers, maybe exists a reading that we have an overdose of controlling. We are controlling professional, and we've considered it's 4 against 1 because Julio is the management, and we are for controlling professional. But Julio is not intimidate, not a little, more or less. But this overdose, of course, there's not an overdose. I understand there is not. But I think that we have a responsibility and a model. There is a subliminal agenda that could be incorporated in the new model dynamic that is being implemented with the contributive effort to put international practices to make more efficient the approach of controlling. Every time that we discussed about the three-line model, the impression that the manager has is we had the overdose of control, and now we have 3 lines of control. After that, it's an additional pressure, additional load over the manager. I would like to add that, in fact, EA took out the term of defense of the model, and that was not an issue of words. In fact, the model of 3 lines, it's not to have the sequence of screens, like 3 levels of filters. The logic of the model is not a logic of screens. It's an integrated logical. Represented by Julio has the director responsibility to establish the necessary control, adequate control to their tolerance, which is, I think, is the right word to use in the public sector. We are not trained and have normative space. We can tell that we tolerate a percentage of undue payment in the case of the payments that you exemplify. So the first line is in this controlling, and the second line is not an additional screen. It's an instance of support and assistance in the methodological point of view so they can operate well. And the third line evaluates if that's working or not and offer a recommendation so the second line can improve their dynamic of assistance. And then the first line improve the controlling. The external control looks at this dynamic and offers and their look in a distances. In a regulatory distances, that's why is the external control of the public administration. When we are looking in the 3-line models at screens, it seems that what left that go to the next level. But in fact, these lines work along with and not as a cascade of screen. They are collecting what they can in a way that nothing left for the external control to examine. We have to debate, discuss, and take this opportunity how the TCU offer, so the public manager
não sendo
would
reativo
not be
aos controles,
reactive to the
ele não tem a
controlling,
leitura de que ele está
not
sofrendo uma
read
overdose
that
de
they are
controle, mas
suffering an
perceber que
overdose
ele é
of
o
control.
protagonista do
He's
momento.
the
Então, apesar
protagonist
de
of
sermos quatro
controlling.
profissionais de
We
controle aqui
are
na sala, o
four
verdadeiro
professionals of
protagonista do
controlling, but the
controle é o secretário
protagonist is
Júlio,
the
porque ele é o
Secretary
protagonista
Julio,
do controle
because he is
segunda,
the
terceira
first
linha
line.
são
Second and third
coadjuvantes
line
e o
are
outro externo
coadjuvants,
cumpre seu papel
co-hosts,
constitucional
co-actors,
de instância de accountability,
and
de
the
instância
instance of
externa
accountability,
de accountability tão
the external
necessária como
accountability
definiu a
so
nossa
need
Constituição.
as our
Então, acho,
Constitution
Rinaldo, que
says.
talvez a gente
I'm
deva
thinking now
rediscutir
that
melhor
we
a
can
própria abordagem do
rediscuss the
modelo de três
approach
linhas,
of the three-line model,
tendo uma olhada em
avoiding a
cascata,
look in
sequencial e
cascade
considerando um olhar mais integrado
sequences
também.
and take in consideration an integrate look. I thank you, Dr. Bessa, and inform that we reach 5 p.m. and I had a concern that we didn't have enough material to talk about, but I was wrong. I'm sure that we had more 3 hours, 2 or 3 hours. We had subjects to discuss because of the theme and because of the quality of the speeches that we have. I participate in some moderation, and this one for me was one of the best and was very easy. When I say that was easier because of the knowledge that you have. I would like in in my name, and to thank all the panelists and the ones that follow us by the Worldly Network. And tomorrow we still have the more of the seminar. We have the participation of the United States in the afternoon. We have another speech about the experience in Brazil. And Wednesday, I'm going to join the panel, International Experience of the Certification of International Accounts. So we can say that the team is accounting. We need to render accounting. And I would like to finish quoting a poem about, from Frei Antônio de Chagas, which was Portuguese from the 17th century, and the title is Count and Time. I used that poem when I render of account, and I put that poem on the account. And the ones that don't know, you can Google it, and it's Count and Time. God asks us the strict count of my time, and I'm going in my time give him an account. But how without time give him a time? To have my count making time, my time was give me and I didn't make a count. Nowadays, I want to make a count and I don't have time. All you that have time, please do not expend your time in any activity. We still have time in your time. When the time arrives to make a count, you're going to cry to not have time. How we observe the time. And here I have the evidence that I make some notes inspired in the Frei. I could say that it's a hard work to make account. We need to render account, to give account without transparency does not count. So we need to show the right counts. If we not have the certification, we don't have a good word. So we need to walk together. Assured count. We always have to render account. With the certification, we can gain the citizens. I thank you. Tiago, congratulations for the event. Bessa, thank you very much. Alexandre. I just want to be a moderator, so I'm not counting here. but we are all together. We are civil servants, and our goal is that the state to render account, attend to the goal with the welfare. So I declare ended this session. Thank you very much once more.
Muito obrigado, Rinaldo. Um abraço, pessoal. Um abraço.